She was promised to a king, but gave herself to a human instead. Elliot Hayes stood at the viewport of the interstellar transport watching as the massive diplomatic nexus came into view. The sprawling space station hung against the backdrop of an amber nebula, its gleaming spires reflecting cosmic light. He adjusted the collar of his formal interstellar security corps, uniformed the weight of his concealed weapons of familiar comfort commander, Hayes approaching final docking proct procedures. The pilot announced over the comm acknowledged. Elliot replied, his eyes never leaving the station somewhere. Within that labyrinth of diplomatic quarters was his new charge, an alien ambassador whose survival was now his responsibility. Colonel Harlow waited on the other side of the airlock, her weathered face a map of stress. Hey, glad they sent you, Sir. Elliot nodded, falling into step beside her as they moved through the diplomatic quarter, the situation more volatile than command. Let on, Harlow said, lowering her voice. 3 security breaches in the last week. The most recent left 2 Valkyrie guards dead. Elliot's jaw tightened. Any leads? Nothing concrete. Could be Scion hardliners opposed to the treaty. Could be Valkyrie separatists who don't want to align with Drock. They entered a secure lift, and Harlow pressed her palm to the scanner as it hummed to life. She turned to face Elliot directly. Listen, Hayes, the Valkyrie requested human security specifically because of our unconventional thinking, but don't mistake that for respect to them. We're tools useful for our unpredictability, but evolutionarily inferior. Elliot's expression remained neutral. It wasn't the first time he'd faced Xenop species prejudice. I don't need them to respect me, Colonel, just need them to let me do my job. That's the spirit. Harlow handed him a secure data pad, full briefing on ambassador security, protocols, physiological data. Cultural notes. The lift doors parted to reveal an opulent corridor lined with exotic plants. 2 Valkyrie guards stood at attention outside an ornate door, their feline features impassive but alert. Ambassador Naira is expecting you, Harlow said the Valkyrie security chief. Terran will handle the formal introduction. The door slid open, and a muscular Valkyrie male emerged. His fur was a deep russet color, facial markings denoting high military rank, and his green eyes assessed Elliot with undisguised skepticism. This is the human security specialist, Terran asked, his accent giving the words a melodic quality, despite the clear disdain. Commander Elliot Hayes Harlow. Confirmed. 15 years in special tactical operations. 7 as head of diplomatic security in the Riel conflict zone. 0 casualties under his protection. Terran's ear twitched a subtle tell that Elliot filed away. Ambassador Nara will receive him. Now Elliot followed Terran through the doorway. The ambassador's quarters were a study in elegant functionality, luxurious, but arranged with practical efficiency. The lighting was dimmer than human preference, accommodating the superior night vision of the Valkyrie. Wait here, Terran instructed, disappearing through another doorway. Elliot used the moment to continue his assessment. 3 visible exits, likely a 4th hidden behind the textured wall. Panel to his left. Are you quite finished evaluating my living space as a potential battlefield? The voice was female, cultured with a harmonic undertone that human vocal cords couldn't replicate. Elliot turned to face Ambassador Naira. As she entered the room, she moved with fluid grace each step, a calculated display of regal bearing her features were strikingly beautiful, a perfect blend of feline and humanoid characteristics. Glossy black hair framed a face with high cheekbones and full lips, while her ears, covered in short velvet like fur, twitched slightly as she assessed him. Her eyes were her most arresting feature, large, almond-shaped, and a luminous gold that seemed to glow from within. A tail, elegantly adorned with ceremonial rings, swayed gently behind her. Elliot bowed slightly, the proper greeting for her rank. Ambassador NAA Commander Elliot Hayes, Interstellar Security Corps. I've been assigned as your personal security detail until the treaty signing. Naira circled him once. Her assessment thorough. Your kind always thinks in terms of combat scenarios. It's why we requested human security. That Constant paranoia has its uses. We prefer to call it preparedness, Ambassador. Elliot replied evenly. A smile quirked the corner of her mouth, revealing the hint of a fang. Semantics tell me. Commander Hayes, do you understand what's at stake with this treaty peace between the Valkyrie and Sethian? System stabilization of trade roots the end of a conflict that's claimed millions of lives, and my marriage to King Drac, she added, watching his reaction. Does that detail disturb your human sensibilities? The idea of an arranged union for political purposes? Elliot maintained his professional demeanor. My sensibilities aren't relevant to your security. Ambassador, diplomatic as well as vigilant NAA, observed. Perhaps you'll survive this assignment after all. Terran re-entered the room. Ambassador, the reception begins in 30 minutes. The Cyan delegation has already arrived. Naira nodded. Then we shouldn't keep them waiting. Commander Hayes, you'll accompany me. Consider this your first test. The Grand Hall was a vast domed chamber at the heart of the diplomatic nexus. Crystalline sculptures representing unity hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic patterns across gathered dignitaries. Elliot maintained his position 3 steps behind. Ambassador Naira, eyes constantly scanning for threats. The Cyan delegation approaches. Terran murmured. A group of tall, elegant beings moved through the crowd. The Cyans were reptilian, their scaled skin ranging from emerald to turquoise. They moved with cold precision that spoke of their evolutionary history. As apex ambush hunters, at their center walked King Drac, taller than his entourage, with scales that shimmered with an iridescent quality. He carried himself with absolute certainty. A ceremonial crest rose from his head, adorned with precious metals and gems. Ambassador Naira, Dac's voice was surprisingly melodic. Your presence honors us. NAA performed the elaborate Cyan greeting with perfect form. The honor is mine, King Drac. May this gathering mark the beginning of a new era for our peoples. Dac's vertical pupils dilated slightly. You are even more striking in person than the diplomatic transmissions suggested. Your flattery is noted. Nara replied with practiced diplomacy. The kink gaze shifted to Elliot. And this must be the human security specialist. Your species has such interesting approaches to protection. Elliot noticed a subtle movement near a service entrance. A server whose uniform hung slightly wrong. The server's hand dipped into a pocket, emerged, merging with something small and metallic. Elliot was moving before conscious thought. Years of training taking over. He closed the distance to Naira in 2 strides, pulling her behind his body down. He commanded. The explosion that followed was contained, but powerful. Elliot kept his body between Naira and the threat, scanning for secondary attackers as emergency shields activated around various dignitaries. Stay down, he ordered Naira, who for once didn't argue. Karen and the other Valkyrie guards had formed a protective circle, but Elliot's focus remained on the service entrance, where a shadow moved against the chaos. Drawing his weapon, Elliot fired not at the fleeing figure, but at the control panel of a cargo lift. The attacker was heading toward the panel, sparked and died. The doors remaining shut trapped. The assassin turned, revealing a face in bio camouflage. Station security forces converged on the attacker, and Elliot turned back to Naira. Are you injured? Ambassador, her golden eyes were wide, pupils dilated in adrenaline response. No, your reaction time is impressive. Just doing my job, Elliot replied, helping her to her feet. The security chief's expression had shifted from disdain to grudging reassessment. The ambassador's quarters have been secured. We should move her there immediately. King Drac watched their departure, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed on the human who had just saved his future bride. That was no random attack. Elliot paced the secure conference room adjacent to Naira's quarters. Holographic displays of the Grand Hall incident floated before him. Frozen at the moment, the explosion detonated. The timing, the placement. Someone knew exactly where the ambassador would be standing. Admiral Voss, the human security liaison to the diplomatic nexus, nodded grimly. Agreed, we're looking at either an intelligence leak or an inside operative. Terran's tail lashed in agitation. Are you suggesting Valkyrie? Betrayal, our people would die before endangering the ambassador. No one's making accusations. Elliot said, zooming in on the assassin's captured image, but someone knew her schedule, her position, preferences, and the blind spots in the security grid. The door slid open, and Naira entered. All three men straightened. Instinctively, she wore a simple silver tunic, now her ceremonial adornments removed, but her presence commanded the room. Nonetheless, your assessment, Commander Hayes. She fixed those golden eyes on him. Awaiting his professional opinion without preamble, we need to completely overhaul your security protocols, Elliot gestured. To the display, new routes, randomized schedules, limited advance notice of your movements and the treaty negotiations. NAA asked, her tail sweeping in a controlled arc behind her. Admiral Voss cleared his throat. The diplomatic council suggests postponing for at least unacceptable. Naira cut him off. Any delay plays directly into the hands of those who wish to derail this peace process. Elliot studied her posture, the subtle tells of her species, ears forward in determination, pupils narrowed in focus. Then we adapt. I'll need complete access to your quarters, your schedule, and authority to implement security measures without bureaucratic delays. You ask for unprecedented access, human. Naira's gaze was measuring. I ask for what I need to keep you alive, Ambassador. Elliot met her look without flinching. Unless you prefer a posthumous peace treaty, Terran hissed softly at the impertinence, but Naira's ears twitched, the Valkyrie equivalent of raised eyebrows. Very well, you have it, she addressed Terran. The commander will have full security clearance, effective immediately. The Valkyrie security chiefs fur bristles visibly. Ambassador, with all due respect, was my directive unclear? Chief Terran, the harmonics in her voice took on an edge that made the air feel suddenly charged. Terran's ears flattened. No, Ambassador, I will see to it. Personally, good Commander Hayes, I expect a full security assessment by morning, gentlemen. With a final nod, she departed as regally as she had entered. Admiral Voss let out a low whistle once the door closed. I've never seen a Vera Royal grant that level of access to an outsider. She's pragmatic, Elliot replied, already downloading the station schematics to his tactical pad, and she understands what's at stake. Don't mistake necessity for trust, human. Terran warned, you're still an evolutionary inferior. In her eyes, a useful tool, nothing more. Elliot didn't bother responding. He had work to do. 3 days later, Elliot stood outside the ambassador's private washroom, trying to ignore the sounds of running water from within. The new security protocols had eliminated any semblance of personal space, a fact Naira had accepted with surprising grace, though not without the occasional barbed comment. The door slid open, releasing a cloud of scented steam. Naira emerged, wrapped in a silk robe, her wet hair falling in ebony waves down her back. Water droplets clung to the fine fur of her ears and jawline, catching the light like tiny diamonds. Is your constant hovering truly necessary, Commander? She asked, moving to her dressing area, where an array of formal attire awaited her selection until we've identified all potential threats. Yes, Elliot kept his eyes professionally averted as she disappeared behind a decorative screen. The meeting with the Cyan delegation is high risk. Will be using Route C to the conference chamber with 2 decoy teams. Extensive preparations for a simple trade discussion. Her voice drifted over the screen, accompanied by the rustle of fabric. No interaction with King Drac is simple. Elliot countered his security detail has requested 3 separate changes to the meeting parameters. Since yesterday, Naira emerged now dressed in formal diplomatic attire of deep blue that complemented her golden eyes. You've been studying the science. It wasn't a question, but Elliot nodded. Their physiology, cultural markers, security tactics, their apex predators who evolved as ambush hunters. They don't think like Valkyrie or humans. Most humans wouldn't bother with such distinctions. Naira approached, studying him with renewed interest. You see nuance where others see only threat. Understanding your enemy improves survival odds. Is that all we are to you? Potential enemies. There was genuine curiosity in her tone. Elliot met her gaze everyone's a potential threat until proven otherwise species doesn't factor into it. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, a surprisingly egalitarian paranoia their conversation was. Interrupted by Terran's arrival ambassador, the transport is ready. The journey to the conference chamber proceeded according to Elliot's meticulously planned protocol. He remained beside Naira Hyper, aware of every movement in the corridors twice. They changed routes unexpectedly, a precaution that visibly annoyed Terran, but which Naira accepted without comment. The Scion delegation was already seated when they arrived. King Drac rose, as Naira entered, his scaled crest extending slightly in what Elliot recognized as a display of attraction. Ambassador, NAA, your presence brightens this dreary process of negotiation. The king's harmonics resonated pleasantly, a biological feature designed to put prey at ease. King Drac, let us hope today's discussions prove productive. NAA took her seat at the opposite end of the conference table. Elliot positioned himself at the perfect distance, close enough to reach her in 2 strides, if needed far enough not to interfere with the diplomatic proceedings. He noticed King Dak's security chief, a heavily built scion named Sauron, watching him with cold calculation. The trade negotiations proceeded with the usual diplomatic dance of proposals and counter-offers. Elliot divided his attention between the room's security points and the subtle body language of the Saiyan delegation. Something felt off, a tension in their movements that hadn't been present in previous meetings. His instincts proved correct when the environmental system suddenly fluctuated. The lights dimmed momentarily, and a barely perceptible hiss indicated a change in the air circulation. Elliot moved instantly, pressing a breathing filter against Naira's face before she could inhale gas. Everyone out. The Scions were already moving their nicketing membranes, protecting their eyes. As the Valkyrie delegation began to falter, Elliot lifted Naira, who was already fighting to stay conscious, and activated his emergency transport beacon. Terran emergency protocol Omega, he shouted to the security chief, who was struggling to reach them through the thickening air. The last thing Elliot saw before the emergency transport engaged was King Dak's unreadable expression as he watched them disappear. The emergency transport deposited them in a secure bunker 13 levels below the diplomatic quarters. Elliot laid Naira gently on a medical bed. As the facility's automated systems hummed to life around them, breathe slowly, he instructed, checking her vitals. On the BM monitor, her system was processing the small amount of toxin she'd inhaled before his intervention. Naira's golden eyes were slightly unfocused, but alert the others. Terran Act aided the emergency evacuation for your delegation. We know more once communications are restored. Elliot administered a detoxifying agent through the medical system. This safe house is off-grid. No one knows about it except Admiral Voss and myself. How convenient. Her voice was stronger now, the natural resilience of Valkyrie physiology asserting itself. Elliot moved to the security console, activating the bunker's defense systems. This location wasn't in any of the official security protocols. That's why we're here instead of with the others. You suspected an information leak. Anne observed, sitting up cautiously. Her ears twitched as she took in their surroundings. Sparse but efficient living quarters designed for emergency isolation. I know there's a leak. Elliot corrected. That gas attack was coordinated with precise knowledge of the ventilation system's maintenance cycle. Someone with high-level access is feeding information to the assassins. The communication system chimed. Admiral Voss's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim haze. Confirm security status. Ambassador secure. No pursuit detected. Bunker protocols active. Elliot reported. Good, keep her there. Voss lowered his voice. The situation's deteriorated. 3 Valkyrie delegates in critical condition from the gas. Terran is stable, but incapacitated. The Scions are claiming they were targeted as well, but their natural immunities prevented casualties. Convenient. Elliot remarked. Indeed, King Drac is demanding to see the Ambassador to ensure her well-being personally, Naira moved into view of the communication screen. Tell His Majesty that I am quite well, but must remain in isolation until we determine the source of these security breaches. The diplomatic corps wants you back in protected quarters within 12 hours. Voss warned. Negative. Elliot interjected. We maintain isolation until I personally verify the security of any new location. Voss glanced between them. That's not standard protocol, Commander. Neither is surviving 2 assassination attempts. Naira replied coolly. I concur with Commander Hayes's assessment. We remain in isolation. After the communication ended, Elliot secured the bunker for the night. Cycle with Naira's delegation incapacitated, and Terran unable to fulfill his duties. They were alone. A situation unprecedented in Valkyrie diplomatic history. Your people must have protocols against this, Elliot commented, as he prepared a nutrition packet from the bunker's supplies, a royal being alone with a non-Valkyrie. Naira accepted the offered food with a graceful nod, several all of which are currently being violated by necessity. She studied him openly. Do that make you uncomfortable? Commander, my comfort isn't relevant to your security. You say that often. She settled onto a cushioned bench, her tail curling elegantly beside her. Yet you are more than a security drone. You have thoughts, perspectives. I would hear them. Elliot raised an eyebrow. Is this a diplomatic tactic or genuine curiosity? Cannot it be both? She smiled, slightly revealing the tips of her fangs. We are isolated for at least 12 hours. We might as well understand one another better. Elliot considered this, then nodded. What would you like to know? Explain. Human pair, bonding to me. The directness of her question caught him off guard. Your species places great emphasis on emotional connection in mating, yet you form allegiances based on abstract concepts like nations and ideologies, rather than bloodlines. That's a complex topic, Elliot replied, settling into a chair across from her. We have time, she reminded him. Over the next hours, their conversation ranged across cultural differences. Elliot explained human concepts of personal choice and emotional connection, while Naira detailed the Valkyrie caste system and her royal obligations. So this marriage to King Drac, Elliot ventured, it's purely political. Of course. Naira's ears flicked in amusement. Valkyrie royals don't have the luxury of choosing mates based on personal preference. Our genetic lineages are too important to leave to chance attraction, yet you don't seem particularly enthusiastic about the arrangement. Her expression sobered. My enthusiasm is irrelevant. The peace treaty will save millions of lives. My personal feelings don't factor into the equation. Elliot recognized the practiced response of someone who had accepted an unpleasant duty. You sound like a soldier before a suicide mission. Is that not what arranged diplomatic marriages are? She asked, with surprising candor, a form of self-sacrifice for greater strategic objectives. Before he could respond, the security system alerted them to movement near the bunker's outer perimeter. Stay here, Elliot ordered, moving to the weapons locker. I'm not helpless, Commander. Naira stood her posture shifting subtly to something more primal, more predatory. I never assumed you were. He handed her a compact defensive weapon calibrated for Valkyrie physiology. But you haven't been trained for this type of situation. Her golden eyes narrowed. Then train me. The next hour passed in intensive instruction. Elliot was surprised by how quickly Naira absorbed the training. Her natural Valkyrie reflexes compensating for her lack of combat experience. Keep your weight centered, he instructed, demonstrating a defensive stance. Your species has better balance than humans. Use it to your advantage. Their training session was interrupted when the perimeter alert escalated to critical. 3 figures in stealth gear had bypassed the outer sensors and were approaching the bunker entrance. How did they find us? Naira whispered, taking position, as Elliot had shown her questions for later. Elliot replied, dimming the lights and activating the bunker's defensive countermeasures. Remember what I taught. You stay low, move only when necessary. The first explosion rocked the outer door, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Elliot position positioned himself between the entrance and Nara. Weapon raised the second blast, breached the security door through the smoke 3. Armored figures burst in. Elliot fired, instantly dropping the first attacker with a precision shot the second, and third split in different directions, utilizing professional tactical movement. Naira fired as Elliot had taught her, forcing one attacker to dive for cover. The distraction gave Elliot the opening to engage the third intruder in close combat. The fight was brutal and efficient. Elliot recognized the training patterns of a professional mercenary. A sharp cry of pain cut through the chaos. Elliot turned to see Naira grappling with the second attacker, blood darkening the fur along her arm, where a blade had found its mark. Rage, unlike anything Elliot had experienced, surged through him. He dispatched his opponent with a savage efficiency that would have shocked his military instructors. That launched himself at Naira's attacker. The mercenary never stood a chance. Hold still, Elliot instructed, applying a healing compound to the laceration on Naira's arm. The wound wasn't deep, but the blade had been coated with a mild toxin, not lethal, but designed to incapacitate. You've done this before, Naira observed, watching his methodical movements with those luminous gold eyes. Her breathing had steadied, but her pupils remained dilated from the aftermath of combat. Field medicine was part of my training. Elliot finished bandaging the wound, then began checking the rest of her for injuries. He might have missed. You fought well for someone with no combat experience. I had a good teacher. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth, though I suspect you held back considerably during our training session. Good teachers adjust to their students' needs. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an awareness of how close they were sitting, of his hands still on her arm, of the adrenaline still coursing through both their systems. Elliot broke the contact first, moving to examine the fallen attackers. We need to identify them, find out who sent them. He stripped the helmet from the nearest mercenary, revealing reptilian features. Cyan, he noted, though the facial structure was wrong for pure bloodlines, probably a hybrid from the outer colonies. A convenient scapegoat, Naira theorized, coming to kneel beside him. If captured or killed, they would implicate the Cyans while providing King DRC plausible deniability. Elliot nodded, impressed by her strategic thinking. The question remains, how did they find us? Perhaps we have more than one traitor in our midst. Naira's ears flattened, slightly a sign of distress in her species. The emergency communication system chimed. Admiral Voss appeared on screen, his expression grim. Hayes, status report. Our sensors detected weapons fire. Perimeter breach by 3 hostiles, all neutralized. Ambassador sustained minor injuries, but is stable. Elliot moved aside to allow Voss to see NAA, sending medical extraction team. Immediately Voss responded negative. Elliot countered sharply, no personnel, no extraction. This location was compromised too quickly. We move independently. Voss's face hardened. That's not your call to make, Commander. It is mine, Naira interjected, her regal authority evident despite her disheveled appearance. Commander Hayes has my complete confidence. We will proceed according to his security assessment. After a tense moment, Voss nodded. Understood, Ambassador. What do you need from us? Nothing, Elliot replied. No communications, no support. We go dark until I deem it safe to resurface. Once the communication ended, Elliot moved quickly, gathering and Tal supplies. We need to move immediately. This safe house is compromised. Where will we go? Naira asked, already helping to pack medical supplies. I have another location, one that doesn't exist in any official record. Elliot handed her a civilian outfit from the bunker, supplies, simple clothing that would help disguise her distinctive royal bearing. Change quickly. We leave in 5 minutes. They traveled through maintenance tunnels, rarely used even by station personnel. Elliot led them through a labyrinthine path designed to shake any pursuit, finally emerging in a section of the station designated for long-term civilian residents. The safe house was actually a small apartment registered under a name and identity Elliot had created years ago as a personal contingency. The space was modest, but well-equipped, a main living area, a compact kitchen, a single bedroom, and a bathroom. Not exactly royal accommodations, Elliot apologized. As they entered, Naira examined the space with curiosity rather than disdain. It's intimate, it's secure, Elliot corrected. Activating hidden security systems. No one knows about this place. Not Voss, not your security team, not mine, you don't. Trust your own people. There was no judgment in her tone, only interest. I trust preparation and contingencies. Elliot began treating his own injuries minor, compared to what he dealt with in past missions. Someone leaked information about the official safe house. Until we know who we trust, no. One, Naira approached, taking the medkit from his hands. Allow me. Her fingers were surprisingly gentle as she cleaned a cut along his jawline. The proximity was intimate, her scent something exotic and uniquely Valkyrie, filling his awareness. You saved my life, she said. Quietly again, it's my job, is that all it is? Her golden eyes searched his face. Duty, obligation. Elliot didn't answer, immediately acutely aware of dangerous territory. What else would it be? Instead of answering, Naira accessed the apartment's communication system. I need to check on my delegation. Taryn was injured in the gas